The Westbrook family thought they had finally found a moment of peace, a luxurious vacation at a prestigious beachside resort, a chance to escape their high-pressure lives. Samuel Westbrook, a dedicated FBI agent, and his wife Amelia, a prominent civil rights attorney, had earned this break. But their peaceful getaway shatters when a routine day by the pool turns into a nightmare. Singled out by resort security, Samuel finds himself unjustly handcuffed in front of his terrified children and furious wife, his status as an FBI agent unknown to the officers. What begins as a moment of racial profiling unravels into something far darker. As Amelia fights for answers and justice, they uncover that Samuel's arrest was no accident. It was part of a personal vendetta from a ghost of his past. Now, Samuel must confront the very system he spent his life defending, while keeping his family safe from an enemy who knows his deepest secrets. Will the truth about Samuel's past destroy everything he holds dear, or will the Westbrooks rise above the injustice and reclaim their lives? Waves of Justice is a gripping, heart-pounding tale of betrayal, family, and resilience in the face of a system turned against them. The Westbrook family finally arrived at the Coral Bay Resort, a luxurious beachside getaway they had dreamed of for months. Samuel Westbrook glanced at the sleek building standing against the backdrop of a golden sunset. The air smelled of salt water, and the sound of crashing waves filled his senses. "Here we are," Samuel said, parking the car. He looked over at Amelia, his wife, who smiled softly. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined," Amelia replied, her eyes wide as she took in the lush surroundings. "Can we swim already?" Lucas, their 12-year-old son, eagerly asked from the back seat, barely able to contain his excitement. "First, we check in. Then, maybe," Samuel said, chuckling. "How about you, Sophia? You ready to see the ocean?" 7-year-old Sophia nodded, her wide brown eyes gleaming. "I want to see the sand, Daddy." As they walked into the grand lobby, the opulence of the resort hit them. Polished marble floors, elegant chandeliers, and white pillars that stretched toward the ceiling. Samuel tried to relax, but there was always that feeling of being watched. He glanced at Amelia, who gave him a knowing look, as if she, too, sensed the subtle gazes from the staff and other guests. The receptionist, a woman with a tight-lipped smile, welcomed them. "Good evening. May I have your reservation name, please?" "Westbrook," Samuel replied. "Let me check," the receptionist said, typing on her computer. "Ah, room 405, Ocean View. You're all set. Enjoy your stay." They headed to the elevator, and as the doors closed, Samuel sighed, feeling a slight tension in the air. "Already feels like we're different." Amelia raised an eyebrow. "You noticed too, huh?" "Let's not make this a thing," Samuel said, trying to push the thought away. "We're here to enjoy ourselves." But the quiet unease lingered. The suite was exactly what they had hoped for. Spacious, modern, with a panoramic view of the ocean. Lucas immediately ran to the window, pressing his face against the glass. "This is awesome," Lucas shouted. "I can see the whole beach." Sophia giggled, joining him by the window. "The waves look so big." Amelia walked to Samuel's side, her arms slipping around his waist. "What do you think?" "It's perfect," Samuel replied, though his mind was already starting to wander. Could he really relax? Could he really leave the stresses of his FBI work behind? Even in a place like this? Amelia nudged him. "You're thinking too much again." "I know. It's just hard to turn it off. You need this, Sam." "We all do." Samuel smiled, kissing her on the forehead. "You're right. I'll try." As the kids started exploring the room, Lucas excitedly asked, "Can we go down to the pool now?" Amelia glanced at Samuel. "What do you think? Are we ready to officially start this vacation?" Samuel grinned. "Let's do it." They changed into their swimsuits, grabbed their towels, and headed down to the pool area, ready to soak in the serenity of the resort. But the tension from earlier, that feeling of being watched, still clung to the air. The pool was a paradise. The sparkling water reflected the late afternoon sun, and the palm trees swayed gently in the breeze. Lucas and Sophia wasted no time jumping into the water, their laughter echoing across the pool deck. Amelia stretched out on a lounge chair, pulling out a book she had been meaning to finish. "This is what vacation feels like," she said, sighing contentedly. Samuel settled into the chair beside her, watching their kids play. For the first time in a long while, he felt a small sense of calm. "I could get used to this," he murmured, closing his eyes as the warmth of the sun eased the tension in his muscles. But the peaceful moment didn't last long. Samuel opened his eyes, noticing a security guard standing at the edge of the pool area, his eyes trained on them. At first, Samuel brushed it off, but the guard didn't move. His gaze was too focused, too intentional. Amelia noticed it too. She sat up, lowering her sunglasses. "Do you see that?" Samuel nodded. "Yeah, I see it. He's been staring at us for a while." "Let's just enjoy the day," Samuel said, though the tension in his voice betrayed his words. Amelia leaned back, though she kept glancing in the guard's direction. "I hope you're right." The kids, oblivious to the growing unease, continued splashing in the water. But the feeling of being watched cast a shadow over what was supposed to be a carefree day by the pool. It wasn't long before the security guard approached. Samuel tensed, sitting up straighter as the man walked over. Amelia closed her book, her body language stiffening. "Excuse me," the guard said, his tone formal. "I need to verify that your guest's here." Samuel exchanged a look with Amelia, trying to stay calm. "Is there a problem?" "We've had some non-guests sneaking into the pool area recently. I just need to confirm your room number," the guard said, his eyes narrowing slightly. Samuel clenched his jaw but kept his voice even. "We're staying in room 405. You can check with the front desk." The guard didn't move. "I'll do that. But until then, I'll need you and your family to leave the pool area." Amelia stood up, her frustration evident. "We've already told you our room number. Why are you still questioning us?" The guard's tone remained steady. "It's just protocol, ma'am." Amelia's eyes narrowed. Protocol? Or something else? Samuel placed a hand on her arm, trying to keep things from escalating. "Let them check." Amelia glanced at him, her jaw tight. "This isn't right, Sam." "I know," Samuel said quietly, "but let's not make a scene." The guard walked away, but the damage was already done. The peaceful atmosphere of the vacation had been shattered, replaced by a growing sense of unease and frustration. Minutes later, the guard returned with a colleague. Their expressions were more serious this time, and their body language made it clear that they had already made up their minds. "Sir, we've confirmed that you're guests, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave the pool area until further notice," the second guard said, his tone firm. Samuel stood, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're paying guests. We've done nothing wrong. Sir, please cooperate, or we'll have to involve the police," the guard said, crossing his arms. Amelia stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Is this really necessary? You're singling us out because we don't look like the other guests here. Admit it." The guards exchanged glances but didn't respond. Samuel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Let's just go, Amelia." Amelia looked at him, her eyes blazing with frustration and anger. "This isn't right." "I know," Samuel said softly, gathering their things. "But we're not going to win this here." They walked away from the pool, leaving behind the whispers of other guests and the weight of the confrontation. But the tension between them was thick, and Samuel knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Amelia stormed into the resort's lobby with Samuel following close behind. Her face was set in determined anger as she approached the front desk. The kids trailed behind, their excitement from the pool replaced by confusion. "I need to speak to the manager," Amelia demanded, her voice calm but firm. The receptionist's expression faltered slightly. "One moment, ma'am," she said before picking up the phone and murmuring a few words. Within moments, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit appeared from a back office, his expression polite but guarded. "Good evening. I'm Mr. Harper, the resort manager. How can I help you?" Amelia didn't waste time. "Your security just escorted my family from the pool area for no reason other than the color of our skin," she said, crossing her arms. "We're paying guests, and we deserve better than this." Mr. Harper's smile tightened. "I'm sorry for any inconvenience, Mrs. Westbrook. I assure you, it's not our policy to treat any guests differently." The guards were simply following protocol due to recent security concerns. Amelia's eyes narrowed. Security concerns? That's your excuse for singling us out in front of the entire pool? We have had non-guests access the pool area recently, Mr. Harper said, holding up his hands defensively. It's nothing personal. We simply want to ensure the safety of our guests. Nothing personal? Samuel interjected, his voice low but laced with frustration. It sure felt personal when you had us escorted out in front of our kids. Mr. Harper hesitated, clearly not wanting to escalate the situation further. I apologize again. If there's anything we can do to make it up to you. There's nothing you can do to erase what happened, Amelia said coldly. But this isn't over. As they returned to their suite, Samuel tried to calm his wife down. Let's not let this ruin the whole vacation, he said quietly, though he knew it wasn't that simple. Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, shaking her head. You saw how they looked at us. This wasn't just about security, Sam. This was discrimination, plain and simple. I know, Samuel replied, his hands resting on his hips. But what are we supposed to do? We don't have any proof other than how we felt. Amelia stood up, pacing the room. We can't just let this slide. If we don't stand up for ourselves, they'll keep doing it. To us and to others. Before Samuel could respond, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find two uniformed police officers standing in the hallway. The older officer, with a stern expression, nodded at Samuel. Mr. Westbrook, we need to speak with you. Amelia joined Samuel at the door, immediately suspicious. What's this about? The officer cleared his throat. We've received a report from the resort security about a possible trespassing incident. We need to see identification to verify you're staying here. Samuel's fists clenched at his sides. We've already gone through this with the resort. We're in room 405. You can confirm that with the front desk. The younger officer, standing behind his partner, crossed his arms. We're going to need to see some ID. Samuel's patience was wearing thin. He pulled out his wallet and flashed his FBI badge. Here's my ID. I'm a federal agent. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions hardening. We're going to need more than that, the older officer said, his tone cold. Things escalated quickly. Despite having provided identification and explained their situation, the officers weren't backing down. The tension in the room was palpable, especially with Lucas and Sophia now watching from the living room area. Daddy, what's going on? Lucas asked, his voice shaky. Samuel kept his eyes on the officers. It's okay, son. Stay with your sister. Amelia stepped forward, her voice sharp. This is outrageous. You have no reason to treat us like this. He's an FBI agent, for crying out loud. The younger officer, clearly unfazed, reached for his handcuffs. Turn around, Mr. Westbrook. Samuel stared at him, disbelief mixing with anger. Are you serious right now? Turn around, the officer repeated, his voice more forceful. Amelia moved between them, her voice rising in protest. You're not doing this in front of our children. The officer's partner stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. Ma'am, step back or we'll have to detain you as well. The moment was surreal. Lucas's wide eyes were glued to the scene, his face twisted in fear. Sophia clutched her brother's arm, tears forming in her eyes. Samuel knew there was no point in resisting. Slowly, he turned around, offering his wrists as the cold metal of the handcuffs snapped into place. Lucas let out a sob, and Amelia's voice cracked as she pleaded with the officers. You're traumatizing our children for nothing. But the officers didn't listen. The damage was already done. Back in their suite, the air was thick with tension. After what felt like hours, Samuel had finally been released. But the emotional scars were already forming. Amelia was pacing again, her hands shaking as she fought to keep her composure. We need to sue, she said, her voice raw with emotion. This can't just happen, Sam. They treated you like a criminal in front of our kids. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had been. I know, but let's think this through. We don't want to put the kids through more trauma. Amelia turned on him, her eyes blazing. You're saying we should let this go? After what they did to you? No, I'm saying we need to be smart about it, Samuel replied. We can't just react. We need to think about what's best for our family. Lucas, who had been silent for most of the conversation, suddenly spoke up. Why didn't you fight back, Dad? You always say you protect people, but you didn't even protect yourself. Samuel's heart sank at the pain in his son's voice. Lucas, it's not that simple. But they treated you like a bad guy. Lucas's voice cracked with anger. And you just let them. Sophia sat on the couch, quietly crying into her mother's arms, while Lucas stormed off to his room. Samuel buried his face in his hands, feeling the weight of his son's words. Amelia watched him, her own pain mirrored in her eyes. The family that had come here to bond and relax was now being torn apart by an injustice they couldn't ignore. Later that evening, as the kids slept in their room, Amelia sat at the small desk in their suite, her laptop open. She was already gathering information, making calls to her legal contacts, and planning their next steps. Samuel stood by the window, staring out at the ocean, his thoughts heavy. What are you doing? He finally asked. What do you think? Amelia replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. We're not letting them get away with this. Samuel nodded, but remained silent. Part of him wanted to fight. He knew Amelia was right, but another part of him just wanted to shield his family from any further pain. Could they really afford to go through a public battle? I'm going to call the firm in the morning, Amelia continued. I've already found some similar cases of racial profiling in resorts like this. We can make this a class action. Samuel sighed. Amelia. She stopped typing and looked up at him. You're not going to talk me out of this, Sam. They handcuffed you in front of our kids. This is personal now. I know, Samuel said, turning to face her. But we need to be careful. This could get messy. Amelia's eyes softened as she stood and walked over to him. We're doing this for them, she said, glancing toward the kids' room. We can't let them think this is okay. We have to fight back. Samuel looked at his wife, seeing the fierce determination in her eyes. She was right. They had no choice but to stand up for themselves and for their children. This wasn't just about them anymore. Okay, he said, his voice steady. Let's do this. Together. Amelia sat at the small desk in their suite, her laptop open, a determined look on her face. We need to build a strong case, she muttered to herself, typing furiously. There's no way we let them get away with this. Samuel leaned against the window, staring out at the ocean. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, anger, frustration, and guilt. How are you going to start this? He asked, turning to her. I'm already pulling together some of the videos people took by the pool, Amelia said. There were plenty of witnesses, and I've already contacted a few. They're willing to speak out. Samuel frowned. I don't want to put anyone else at risk, Amelia. This isn't just about the resort anymore. Amelia's fingers paused over the keyboard. What do you mean? Samuel walked over, sitting beside her. This could get more complicated than you think. The way things escalated with the police. I've seen situations like this turn ugly fast. Amelia sighed, rubbing her temples. Sam, I know it's dangerous, but we have to fight this. We have to show Lucas and Sophia that we won't back down in the face of injustice. I get that, but, Samuel began. But the beep of a new email on Amelia's laptop interrupted him. She clicked it open. Here it is, she said, a small smile forming. Footage from one of the guests. This will help. Samuel looked at the video, but his face remained serious. Amelia, there's something I haven't told you. That night, after Amelia had fallen asleep, Samuel sat alone on the balcony, the weight of the past pressing down on him. The sound of the ocean couldn't drown out the memories of his old FBI cases, the ones that haunted him. He thought of Dominic Rivera, a man who had once been an ally, a police informant on a case that went horribly wrong. It was Samuel's operation that had landed Dominic in prison for a short stint, and though it wasn't Samuel's fault, Dominic had made it clear he blamed him for the fallout. Now, the image of Dominic flashed in Samuel's mind. Was it possible that the police officers involved in the resort's incident weren't acting out of random prejudice, but out of personal revenge? Samuel had always kept that chapter of his life buried, but it was clawing its way to the surface now. His career, his past decisions. They were all colliding with the nightmare his family was living through. I should have known this would happen, Samuel whispered to himself, the realization heavy on his heart. He'd fought his whole life to protect the system he believed in, but now that system was betraying him. The guilt was overwhelming. Should he tell Amelia the truth about Dominic? The next morning, as Samuel wrestled with his thoughts, Amelia found an envelope slipped under their hotel door. She picked it up, frowning. Samuel, come look at this. Samuel walked over, his heart sinking. What is it? Amelia opened the envelope, her hands shaking as she pulled out a piece of paper. The message was short, typed in bold letters. Drop the case or you'll regret it. Amelia's face paled as she held the note out for Samuel to see. They're threatening us. Samuel stared at the message, his jaw tightening. This isn't just about the resort anymore, Amelia. This is something bigger. I think I know who's behind it. What do you mean? Amelia asked, her voice trembling. What aren't you telling me? Samuel ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. There's a man, Dominic Rivera. He's a former informant from one of my FBI cases. It didn't end well for him, and he blames me. Amelia's eyes widened. You think he's behind this? I'm not sure yet, Samuel said, his voice heavy with guilt. But if he is, this is personal. And it's dangerous. Later that day, Samuel decided to confront the officers involved in his arrest. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to sit idly by while his family was threatened. I'm going to the police station, he told Amelia as he grabbed his jacket. I'm coming with you, she said firmly, standing up. No, Amelia. I need to do this alone. If Dominic is involved, this could get messy. Amelia hesitated, then nodded, concern etched across her face. Be careful, Sam. At the police station, Samuel demanded to speak with the officers from the incident. As he waited, his heart pounded in his chest. When the door opened and he saw Dominic Rivera standing in uniform, everything clicked. Dominic, Samuel said, his voice low and dangerous. Dominic smirked, crossing his arms. Samuel Westbrook, didn't think I'd see you again like this. So this was your plan all along? Samuel asked, stepping closer. You orchestrated this whole thing just to humiliate me? Dominic's smile faded. You ruined my life, Samuel. You think I'd forget? No. I wanted you to feel what it's like to be powerless. Samuel clenched his fists, struggling to keep his composure. This isn't just about me anymore. My family is involved. You crossed a line. That's the point, Dominic hissed. Now you know what it feels like to lose control. Samuel left the police station, his mind racing. Dominic's vendetta was more personal and dangerous than he'd realized. As he drove back to the resort, the weight of his past mistakes crushed him. He'd never imagined that an old case would come back to haunt him like this. Back at the suite, Amelia was waiting, her face tense with worry. What did you find out? Samuel hesitated, then spoke the words he had been dreading. It was Dominic. He orchestrated everything. This wasn't just racial profiling. It was revenge. Amelia's eyes widened in shock. Revenge? Because of an old case? Because of me, Samuel said, his voice cracking with guilt. He blames me for what happened to him, and now he's using this to get back at me. Amelia sank onto the bed, her hands trembling. This changes everything. I know, Samuel whispered. And now, I don't know how to protect us from this. The weight of his past had come crashing into the present, and Samuel knew that the battle they were facing was no longer just about justice. It was about survival. Lucas slammed his bedroom door, the sound reverberating through the suite. Amelia looked at Samuel with concern but didn't say anything. Samuel knew what was coming. I can't believe you didn't fight back, Dad. Lucas's voice echoed from behind the door. You just let them treat you like a criminal. Samuel approached the door and knocked softly. Lucas, can we talk? There was a brief pause before Lucas opened the door, his face red with anger. What's there to talk about? You're supposed to be the one who protects us. But you didn't do anything, Samuel sighed, stepping into the room. It's not as simple as just fighting back, son. Sometimes you have to pick your battles. Lucas crossed his arms, his voice trembling. But you didn't pick any battle. You just stood there and let them humiliate you. Lucas, Samuel began, but his son cut him off. I looked up to you, Dad. You're an FBI agent, someone who's supposed to stop the bad guys. But you didn't stop anything. Samuel's heart ached at the disappointment in his son's eyes. I didn't want to make things worse, especially with you and Sophia there. Lucas turned away, his voice softer now but still filled with hurt. You didn't make anything better either. Amelia paced the living room, her phone pressed to her ear. Yes, I want to file the suit as soon as possible, she said, her tone firm. We have enough evidence to make a solid case. She glanced over at Samuel, who was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. She hated seeing him like this, defeated, questioning everything. But she couldn't afford to back down now. I'll meet with the legal team tomorrow, Amelia continued, her voice steady. We're going to hold them accountable. After hanging up, she walked over to Samuel and sat beside him. We're doing the right thing, she said gently. This is how we fight back. Samuel nodded but didn't look up. I know. It's just… Lucas. Amelia frowned. He's angry, but he'll come around. We're doing this for him too. Samuel sighed. He doesn't see it that way. Amelia placed a hand on his shoulder. He's confused. But once we get justice, he'll understand why we're doing this. Samuel looked at her, his eyes heavy with doubt. I hope so. The following day, Samuel left the resort to run errands in town. As he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. His FBI instincts kicked in, and he glanced in the rearview mirror. A black SUV had been trailing him for the last few blocks. Samuel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. This can't be a coincidence, he muttered to himself. He made a sharp turn onto a side street, hoping to lose the car, but the SUV followed. His heart raced as he pulled into an empty parking lot and got out of the car. The SUV stopped a few yards away, and the driver didn't get out. Samuel approached cautiously, his hand hovering near his concealed weapon. As he got closer, the window rolled down, revealing a man with a familiar, cold smile. Dominic, Samuel breathed. The man smirked. Fancy seeing you here, Westbrook. What do you want? Samuel asked, his voice tense. Dominic leaned out of the window slightly, his eyes gleaming with malice. Just a friendly reminder that you're not as untouchable as you think. This little lawsuit you and your wife are planning? Drop it. Samuel clenched his fists. Or what? Dominic's smirk widened. Or things might get worse for your family. Later that evening, Samuel returned to the suite, his mind racing after the encounter with Dominic. He didn't tell Amelia right away. He needed time to process what had happened. But the tension in the air was thick, and it wasn't long before things came to a head. During dinner, Lucas finally exploded. I don't get it. Why are we even here? Why are we still trying to fight this when nothing's going to change? Samuel put down his fork, his patience wearing thin. Lucas, we've talked about this. We're doing what's right. But it's not right. Lucas yelled, standing up from the table. Nothing's right. The police treat us like criminals. You let them, and now we're supposed to just hope a lawsuit will fix everything. Amelia's voice was calm but firm. Lucas, sit down. We're doing this to make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else. Lucas glared at his parents. I don't care about anyone else. I care about us. And right now, it feels like none of you can protect me. Samuel's chest tightened. Lucas, I'm doing everything I can to protect you. Lucas shook his head, his voice trembling. No, you're not. You're just making things worse. With that, Lucas stormed out of the room, leaving Samuel and Amelia in stunned silence. That night, after the kids were asleep, Samuel finally told Amelia about his encounter with Dominic. She sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale with shock. Dominic threatened you, she whispered. He followed you? Samuel nodded. He's not going to stop, Amelia. This isn't just about the resort anymore. He's making this personal. Amelia stood up, pacing the room. Why didn't you tell me sooner? We need to get the police involved. The police? Samuel said with a bitter laugh. The same system that's protecting Dominic? They won't help us. Amelia stopped pacing and turned to him, her eyes fierce. So what do we do, Sam? Just let him keep threatening our family? I don't know, Samuel admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. I don't know how to protect us from this. Amelia's voice cracked as she spoke. We have to figure something out, Sam. Because I'm not letting him destroy us. Samuel nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of his past mistakes. We'll figure it out. Together. But even as he said the words, he wasn't sure if they would be enough. Amelia paced the suite, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and resolve. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, his face lined with exhaustion. He knew what was coming, and he dreaded it. We can't keep going like this, Amelia said, finally breaking the silence. Dominic's threats aren't just about us anymore, Sam. He's targeting our kids. We have to make a decision. Samuel nodded but didn't speak. You need to make a choice, she continued, her voice trembling. Either we fight this battle and expose Dominic, or we drop everything and walk away. But I won't let our family stay in danger. Samuel looked up at her, his eyes full of conflict. You're asking me to choose between justice and our safety. I'm asking you to choose between fighting an endless battle or protecting our children. Amelia corrected, her voice sharper now. If we keep pushing, Dominic will come after Lucas and Sophia. I won't let that happen. Samuel took a deep breath, weighing the cost of continuing the fight. The battle had already torn their family apart, and he couldn't bear the thought of losing more. Amelia, he began, but she cut him off. No, she said firmly. You need to decide, Sam. And you need to decide now. Just as the weight of Amelia's ultimatum settled on Samuel, another knock echoed through the suite. Samuel opened the door cautiously, expecting the worst. It wasn't Dominic this time, but a resort employee holding another envelope. This was left for you at the front desk, sir, the young man said, handing it over. Samuel's heart sank as he tore it open. The note inside was brief but chilling. Drop the case or your children will suffer the consequences. There were no signatures, but the threat was clear. Amelia read the note over his shoulder, her face turning pale. They're threatening the kids, Sam. This is getting worse. Samuel clenched his fists, rage boiling under the surface. I know. We have to get out of here, Amelia whispered, fear creeping into her voice. We need to keep them safe. Samuel's mind raced. He had been determined to see this through, but now that their children were being directly threatened, everything had changed. He looked at Amelia, his voice tight with guilt. I don't know if we can stop this. Even if we leave, Dominic will still be out there. Unbeknownst to his parents, Lucas had overheard their conversation. As they debated their next steps, he quietly slipped into his room and grabbed his phone. I'm not just going to sit here and wait, Lucas muttered to himself. He had heard his father mention Dominic's name, and he knew enough about technology to start digging. Using social media and search engines, Lucas began looking for information about Dominic Rivera. It didn't take long to find several posts about a man who had worked with law enforcement and had a checkered past. Lucas scrolled through photos and old news articles, his heart pounding with each new revelation. But Lucas wasn't the only one watching. As he clicked deeper into Dominic's online presence, a notification popped up on his screen. You're being watched? Lucas's stomach twisted in fear. He quickly closed his laptop and looked around, feeling like someone was watching him even from inside the room. Lucas! Sophia's voice called from the other room, and he snapped out of his paranoia. He took a deep breath and returned to the main room, trying to act normal. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just put himself and his family in even greater danger. Samuel couldn't sleep that night. He sat in the darkness, his mind running through every possible outcome. No matter how much he wanted to protect his family, there was no escaping the truth. Dominic was out for revenge, and the only way to end this was to confront him. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, Samuel made his decision. He quietly got dressed and left a note for Amelia on the nightstand. It was time to face Dominic alone. When Amelia woke up and saw the note, panic gripped her. She ran to the door, but Samuel was already gone. Grabbing her phone, she frantically called him. Sam, where are you? What are you doing? I have to end this, Amelia. Samuel's voice was calm, but there was a finality to it that made her heart race. I'm meeting Dominic. It's the only way. Sam, no. You can't do this alone. Amelia cried. We need to go to the authorities. We need a plan. It's too late for that, Samuel replied, his voice steady. This is between Dominic and me now. I won't let him hurt our family anymore. Sam, please don't do this, Amelia begged, but the call had already ended. Samuel arrived at the secluded location where he had agreed to meet Dominic. The air was thick with tension, and Samuel's heart pounded as he approached the meeting spot, a quiet, isolated stretch of beach far from the resort. Dominic was waiting for him, leaning against his car with a smug smile. You finally came, he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. I knew you'd show up. Samuel stopped a few feet away, his fists clenched. This ends now, Dominic. You've made your point. Let my family go. Dominic chuckled darkly. You don't get to make demands, Westbrook. Not after what you did to me. I didn't ruin your life, Dominic. You made your own choices, Samuel said, his voice low and steady. No, you ruined me, Dominic spat, stepping closer. And now I'm going to take everything from you. Samuel's pulse quickened as Dominic reached into his jacket. For a split second, Samuel feared the worst. But instead of a weapon, Dominic pulled out a small envelope. Your son is quite the investigator, Dominic said with a smirk. I suggest you teach him to stay out of grown-up business. Samuel's blood ran cold. What did you do? Nothing. Yet, Dominic replied, his eyes gleaming with malice. But if you keep pushing this case, I can't guarantee his safety. The confrontation was at a boiling point. Samuel knew he had to act, but one wrong move could cost him everything. As the tension mounted, the final decision loomed over Samuel. Would he trust the system to take Dominic down, or would he have to take matters into his own hands? Samuel stumbled back into the suite, exhausted, his body aching from the confrontation with Dominic. Amelia rushed to his side, her eyes filled with concern. What happened? Are you hurt? She asked, her hands trembling as she helped him sit on the couch. I'm fine, Samuel said, though the bruises on his face and the weight in his eyes told a different story. But it's not over, Amelia. Dominic. He won't stop. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. We have to get the police involved. We can't keep fighting him alone. I know, Samuel replied, running a hand through his hair. But we need to be smart. Dominic has connections. If we don't handle this carefully, he'll find a way to come after us again. Sophia, hearing the commotion, peeked out from her room, her eyes wide with fear. Daddy, are we safe? Samuel's heart broke at the sight of his daughter's worry. We will be, sweetheart. I promise. Amelia's resolve hardened as the hours passed. She knew they couldn't live in fear forever, and the only way to stop Dominic was to expose him. The next morning, she sat down at her laptop and started compiling everything. Videos, witness statements, and the details of Dominic's vendetta. I'm going to the press, Amelia told Samuel, her voice firm. Samuel looked at her, his face etched with concern. You sure about this? It's going to put a lot of heat on us. Amelia nodded. It's the only way. If we bring this to light, Dominic won't be able to hide behind the system anymore. By the afternoon, the story was out. Major news outlets picked up the case, and social media erupted with outrage. Dominic's history, the resort's role, and the police department's complicity were all laid bare for the world to see. They won't be able to sweep this under the rug now, Amelia said, her eyes gleaming with determination. As the public outcry grew, pressure mounted on the resort and the local police department. They could no longer ignore the accusations, and both parties were forced to respond. We've got them on the ropes, Amelia said, pacing the room as she read through a statement from their legal team. They want to settle. They know they can't win in court. Samuel, though relieved, still felt uneasy. It's not about winning or losing. It's about making sure this never happens again. Amelia nodded. That's why we're not just settling. They have to admit their wrongdoing publicly, and Dominic has to face the consequences. A week later, the family sat in the courtroom as the judge read the terms of the settlement. The resort agreed to a public apology, a significant financial settlement, and policy changes to prevent future racial profiling. Dominic, having been exposed, was arrested and charged for his actions. As the gavel came down, Samuel and Amelia exchanged a glance. The battle had been long and brutal, but they had won. Justice had been served. Back at the suite, the mood was lighter, though the emotional scars of the past few weeks remained. Samuel sat with Lucas on the balcony, the warm breeze ruffling their hair. "I'm sorry, Dad," Lucas said quietly, looking out at the ocean. "I didn't understand before. I didn't know how hard it was for you." Samuel placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You have nothing to apologize for, Lucas. I should have done a better job explaining things. The truth is, I've spent my whole life trying to protect people, but sometimes the system doesn't protect us." Lucas nodded, his eyes serious. "I know, but I'm proud of you, Dad, for fighting." Samuel's heart swelled with emotion. "I'm proud of you too, son, for standing up, even when it was hard." Inside, Amelia and Sophia sat together, Sophia drawing pictures of the beach while Amelia watched her, feeling a deep sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, they felt like a family again. A month had passed since the settlement, and the Westbrook family was stronger than ever. Samuel stood on the balcony, looking out at the horizon, deep in thought. The victory had come with a cost, and he knew his time with the FBI was nearing an end. Amelia joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You're thinking about leaving, aren't you?" Samuel nodded. "Yeah, I think it's time. I've seen too much, and I'm not sure I can keep doing this job the way I used to." Amelia smiled softly. "Whatever you decide, we'll support you." "I want to do something that makes a real difference," Samuel said, his voice steady. "Maybe I can help change the system from the outside. Work on reforms." Amelia nodded. "That sounds like something worth fighting for." As the sun set over the ocean, Samuel and Amelia stood together, knowing that while their fight for justice wasn't over, they were ready to face whatever came next, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever.